Welcome everyone. It's great to see you all here this evening. Amongst you are some UBC students who invited our speaker to talk here tonight. He was kind enough to fly all the way from Toronto, and we are happy to have him here with us today. The title of this talk is The Role of Divine Teachers in the Development of Humanity, and there will be time for questions at the end. The world and society at large are disintegrating in many ways all around us. What is the remedy? There is such a focus on what is best for oneself, and that the answer to everything can be found within technology and science. But this has not proved to be an adequate solution. What if we were to weave religion and the teachings we have learned from it, together with science, to work to find solutions to meet the needs of all who live in this big, beautiful world? Who are the divine educators? Where did they come from? Are they related in some way? Can they be of help in the advancement of the whole of humanity? What is the remedy? Without further ado, I invite our speaker for this evening up to the podium, Mr. Rawhani.
So very nice to see you. I don't know if you can hear me. People
Yes.
in the back row? You didn't hear the last few words. It's a joy to be here. Really. With a list of things that my daughter Talia mentioned, I find it very daunting. So I'm ready for inspiration by looking at you and having talked to some of you, so that what I may say may be relevant and may do justice to the points that were mentioned earlier. How can we help effectively to change the course of history to run in a better direction? The best direction is the direction given to us by Allah for this day and age. I will explain that further. Why Baha'u'llah? Baha'u'llah because he's the latest but not the last of the divine educators of humanity. So why do we need these divine educators, these divine luminaries who would guide us? It's just the same as the earth needs the sun, its heat, its radiance, for its development and all that it has to offer to us. The manifestation of God has been likened by the Baba and Baha'u'llah to the sun, S-U-N, of truth, the sun of reality with capital R. This reality relates to the ultimate reality, which is God. For development, we need to be nourished by the teachings of the manifestation of God. Whereas the sun, the earth benefits from the sun, from its rays and heat, for growth and development. The nourishment that we get from the manifestation of God is His words, His utterances, His writings, His example, or those He appoints to exemplify the teachings. I'm going to be giving you a few analogies about the manifestation of God. So that was one, the sun. Would you read this line, because this is the heart of the matter, and then I follow up.
Okay.
He hath caused those luminous gems of holiness to appear out of the realm of the Spirit in the noble form of the human temple, and to be made manifest unto all men, that they may impart unto the world the mysteries of the unchangeable being, and tell of the subtleties of his imperishable essence.
Sure, these are words of Baha'u'llah from this book, the Book of Certitude, that these are gems of holiness that appear from the realm of spirit. They appear. In other words, we cannot look at them as ordinary human beings. Yes, so that they're not frightening to us, they would have to look like us. And Muhammad did a lot by saying, I'm a servant of God like you. I am his messenger, but also his servant. And a servant just like you. He reiterated that so many times. The Bab and Baha'u'llah have chosen a more descriptive expression to refer to them. Yes, of course they are messengers because they have a message, they have a mission. But they're called manifestations of God, which means they manifest the qualities and attributes of God. They manifest the qualities and attributes of God. So that what we know as God, who is the invisible of invisibles, and we, the finite, the limited, have no way of connecting directly to the infinite source of inspiration and progress. He has made it possible for the connection between the Creator and creation through the link of manifestations, who manifest his qualities, attributes, and tell us of the subtleties of his supreme reality, and give us guidance for each one, for our day and age. Now the second step, there are some other ways that Baha'u'llah expresses who they are. He says, these sanctified mirrors, these daysprings of ancient glory, are one and all the exponents on earth of him who is the central orb of the universe, its essence and ultimate purpose. So, these mirrors, that's another analogy that is used by both the Bab and by Baha'u'llah. We find in the writings of Abu Baha, the son of Baha'u'llah, who is the interpreter of the sacred word, and also the guardian of the faith, Shubri Effendi, how this word mirror becomes meaningful as an analogy to what's intended. Just the same as when you hold the mirror in front of the sun, as we did when we were kids, and we would reflect the rays and lights of the sun to other places, and sometimes to the annoyance of some people will be reflected out in their eyes. Mirror reflects the sun. Now you can look, Baha'u'llah says, in the mirror and say, oh, look at the sun here, and you would be right. He says, but if you said, no, this is a reflection, this is the sun reflecting in the mirror, you would be right, he says. Then he says, but if you said, no, this is just a mirror, you would also be right. As long as we understand that the manifestation is manifestation and is not God. This has to be very clear. They are noble in essence. There is no possibility that God can physically come down to earth. Otherwise, what would be the purpose of manifesting himself through these beautiful heavenly gems of holiness we call manifestations of God? In fact, the guardian of faith, Shuri Effendi, says, were he, God, who has the ability to do all things, were he to bring himself down, were he to be able to bring himself from his retreats of holiness, his celestial kingdom, to earth in the finite form of a human being, he would immediately cease to be the unknowable God who is infinite. So this is the only other way of God's communication with us, through his manifestations that reflect his beauty and purpose as well as his will for our age. So what's the difference between them? Who is greater amongst them? They're all great. And we find in their statements, for example, Muhammad says, I am Jesus. In another place he says, I am Moses. I'm Abraham. I'm Adam. I'm the beginning. And I'm the last. Baha'u'llah explains this, that this means that the undying, world-vitalizing Spirit of God that was in them is one and the same. They're not inspired by different gods. There's only one God. So, where do they get their inspiration from? The same source. Now, then there is a point of distinction. So there is this unity of all the manifestations of God. Are they all the same person? No. Each one has a name and an appearance. They're different people. However, the undying, world-vitalizing Spirit that appears in them, that one is the same. That's the point of unity and oneness of all the manifestations of God. Now, Baha'u'llah also talks about the point of distinction. For example, if you look at, just remind me this if I forget. I'm going to go back to the previous point. What did Jesus say about that one? I go away and I come again. He referred to himself as the Son of Man. Son of Man. And then he said, the Son of Man shall descend in the cloud of glory. And he also said he would come in the glory of the Father. So then, at this time, he has come in the glory of the Father. The same undying, world-vitalizing Spirit that animated Jesus Christ 2,000 years ago is present today through the instrumentality of Baha'u'llah, who is the Heavenly Father. But now, the thought may come to your mind, are you saying Baha'u'llah is God? No, that's not possible. I've already said that before I mentioned this point. Jesus himself made that clear, calling none good save the Father who is in heaven. So he didn't say he was God, because he was on earth at the time. Calling none good save the Father who is in heaven. Which means he made a distinction between him and God himself. But Baha'u'llah says, were they, with regards to that analogy of the sun, its reflection or itself or the mirror, as long as we are clear what we are saying, then all of that is right. But if we stick to one and we disregard the other elements, then we could be very wrong. And we could start referring to different manifestations, different mouthpieces, different exponents of God as inferior or superior, which is very wrong. So what is this question of, other than unity, which is a question of distinction and difference, that each one speaks in the language of the people amongst whom he appears. So, are some of the dispensations greater than others? Yes, that's possible. Why? Because they are addressing a more elevated human race as time goes by. You cannot continue to teach like the analogy of children in a classroom. What you're teaching children in grade 1, you cannot teach people in grade 10 what you taught children in grade 1. It has to be in accord with their capacity to understand and digest. So in this day, Baha'u'llah is addressing a humanity which is coming of age, is reaching its maturation. So that also speaks to the twin manifestations of God that we have, the one who is to be treated like a fully fledged manifestation of God, and with his own revelation, with his own books. Good heavens, he wrote in a short period of time that he lived about what, if we put them together, about 100 volumes. And people who eyewitnessed, they saw the speed with which he wrote. And people who eyewitnessed Baha'u'llah writing was the same, as fast, if not even faster. Sometimes they used secretaries. And sometimes the secretary could not bear the power that emanated from the face of Baha'u'llah when he was revealing God's purpose for the day. It is said that when Baha'u'llah revealed his tablet to the kings, he addressed them all saying who had come. One collectively and then individually to those that were around. Napoleon, Nasruddin Shah, Iran, Queen Victoria of England, and so on. King of Germany, at that time Germany had a king, and Austria. Addressing them in very powerful language. I share with you a little bit to see with the language, the tone, and gave them guidance to assist them to develop their countries. O kings of the earth, he who is the sovereign Lord of all is come. He, in an unambiguous manner, he explains, he actually does say somewhere along the line that the manifestation is the sovereign of all sovereigns. We can understand that. There's so many Christian kings that still highly respect Jesus. So many Muslim kings who revere Muhammad beyond themselves. So the manifestation is the true King of all men on behalf of God. Sweet is one of the things that he wrote to Queen Victoria. Because why so sweet? Why is it so different? Amongst the kings, there were some who were extremely proud, such as Napoleon, who took it and said, "We things is from God. Tell him I'm two gods," and threw away the message of Baha'u'llah. And we know if we follow up what happened to him, that's exactly what he deserved. He fell from power. And Baha'u'llah reminded the king of Austria and Germany, Austria and also Germany, he said, remember what happened whose power, to the one whose power exceeded yours. He threw away the book of God behind his back, and then he was quickly dethroned by the hand of power that had given him the power. In other words, those who are in authority, it is by the leave of God. And then Baha'u'llah says we, Baha'is, should respect them, should not rebel against them. We should respect our government. We don't demonstrate against our government. What we might do is to bring to their attention certain things, but we do not demonstrate against them. It's categorical in Baha'u'llah's most holy book, the Ikhlas. So, it's very interesting. Again, I want to go back to what I was going to say about Jesus. I'm anticipating that some of you are of Christian background. I want to be relevant, so. You want a nice story, analogy that is told, or one that is woeful? He did both. Okay, when he and his disciples were in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he came back to them, he said, I came twice to you and you did not. You were asleep. So I came back a third time to wake you up. They all thought about this, they talked about this. Is he saying that he came back and they were sleeping? In some of the movies about this element, it shows that they were sleeping. But it's really referring to, if it was to be interpreted properly, it really refers to the fact that his followers were asleep when the manifestation of God came, Muhammad. And they were also asleep when another manifestation of God came, the Bab, who is the forerunner to Baha'u'llah and also a fully fledged manifestation of God. Then he came a third time to wake people up. This is the waking up time. The alarm has run, and we realize with the greater capacity that God has given to us, our capacity is increased by the power of the manifestation of God. Otherwise, why would he give a message that is beyond people? Could Jesus have given Baha'u'llah's message 2,000 years ago about the unity of mankind? The establishment of a world commonwealth? No. There are still flat earth society who believe the earth is flat, and if you get to the edge you fall off. These people have existed forever. You may not have met any of them, and they really insist on that. No, they did not think that. He, in fact, also mentioned that I go away, and when he, the Spirit of Truth, is come, he will guide you into all truth. So Baha'u'llah says, I am the Spirit of Truth. And here is a guidance for you for today. So Baha'u'llah can talk about a world commonwealth, a message which we eminently appreciate is what we need to regard the world as one country. And how would you govern its manifold activities and the manifold, the diversity of all the people, the differences of their culture. There's got to be something relevant to all of this. Allah says the earth is one country, mankind, its citizens. So he doesn't just make these wonderful pronouncements. He has a world order, a blueprint for the way in which humanity can live, locally, nationally, and internationally, with the institutions that he has created at those three levels, plus continental supports that are apt to give appropriate guidance to humanity. And these institutions, they're not like people who just inherited. They're elected in the Baha'i Faith. We elect them once a year, locally and nationally, through a one-stage or two-stage election. And then internationally, the nationals will elect the supreme body, the Universal House of Justice, which resides in the Holy Land, in Haifa, Israel. And guides the entire Baha'i world, the community, individuals, and the institutions that are to go. We live in a society which is triangular. We have institutions that guide the community that belongs to them and individuals that live in those communities. So, again, we keep going back to what Jesus said there, that he would come again, and what would happen. Forget about the woeful ones, that if they did not adhere to what would happen to them, humanity. And then Muhammad also is very emphatic about future revelations. In the same way as he said, I am Jesus, I'm Moses, I'm the beginning and I'm the end. I'm Adam, and I'm the seed of the prophets, which is the law. That has another explanation too. But Jesus also said, I'm Alpha and Omega. Again, going back to the undying Spirit of God is one and the same in all of them. But they are, their wisdom is unsurpassed, never to say something that is beyond people's capacity. I think that's been established here. After each one of them, I'm going to turn it over to yourselves. There is rise of civilization and growth, development, happiness, and progress, even not just materially, physically, but also, and spiritually, but also technically and technologically, we see progress. Amazing things happened when the Bab declared his mission. He chose one of the first 18 individuals who recognized him after search rather than he declaring his position to them, to go with him on a trip to Mecca in Arabia, because that was where Muslims were turning to. And it was a part of their prophecy that he would go there and introduce himself to the Sheriff of Mecca. On the way there, the sea journey was very, very awful, and people were sick all over the place. The one that was with him was Qudus, that was his name, a young 22-year-old person. He says that the Bab was saddened because of their physical condition. And he offered a prayer that the means of ocean travel would be improved soon, that its perils would be eliminated, those are his words, and their speed would be heightened, and their comfort would be greater. You see what we have now? We can even go on an enjoyable ocean liner, got a trip with everything on it. I don't know if that's what he had in mind, but the ease and comfort and speed. He also said, so that the cause of him whom God shall make manifest. That's a reference to Baha'u'llah, who declared himself 9 or 19 years later. So that his cause may progress rapidly. Those of you who have heard his name, Varpa, Dr. Varpa, who visited this place and passed away a few years ago, was his grandson. So the first Varpa and the name was given to him by Baha'u'llah, which is the bird of paradise. He asked Baha'u'llah, and he was a great poet, very eloquent, this man, and his son Rawhani was with him. After begging Baha'u'llah to allow himself and his son to be martyred, actually he asked to be martyred for the sake of Baha'u'llah's eldest son Abdul Baha, who was managing everything and doing things and was a successor to Baha'u'llah, that in the spirit of humility and who begged his father Baha'u'llah to allow him to reach a level of lowliness and humility as a humble servant that no one else could ever reach such lowliness. And Baha'u'llah granted that. So he called himself Abdul Baha. That wasn't his name, which means servant of glory, servant of Baha'u'llah. This is why he's so adored so much, because of his qualities, not only in leadership, but his love, his affection. I happen to have the good fortune of meeting a few people who met him and told so many wonderful stories. Good Lord, we're so close to them that we even have people maybe even here, or maybe you are too young, but I certainly met someone who I met Baha'u'llah and told, Mr. Samandi, anyone met him? No. Anyway, he was one of the hands of the course appointed by Shobi Effendi, the guardian of the faith. He stayed in our house for 5 months, many times, but once 5 months. And I kept on, I was about 10 or 11. I kept on taking my younger brother to him, to listen to him. This man met Baha'u'llah when he was 16. And we would ask him, we knew what was he like. You know, there was incredible sensation in us. He was very conscious of our condition as children, and he was loving and encouraging. He said things we would never forget. Reason why I mentioned it is so that we realize how close we are to Baha'u'llah in time. His son Abdul Baha and his great-grandson Shogi Effendi the Guardian. And those were the only individuals. After that, Baha'u'llah created an order which it comes about through an electoral process. That's how it is. I've said enough. I'm just reflecting whether I covered the point. Yes, the question that I was going to ask you, and I said you might know. Development that took place after these manifestations of God. Can anyone cite any? Let us start with Jesus. I go in the greater picture. We Baha'is know, for example, Adam, not as the first man or anything, no, not at all. Allah says there have been human beings all the time. That evidence, because of problems on earth, has been destroyed. With Adam came the consciousness of right and wrong. The question of apple, the analogy apple and snake and that in the Bible, it is explained by Abdullah so clearly that this is a question of recognizing right from wrong. With Abraham, which which is much later. Adam was only 6,000 years ago. That's been accurately estimated. And there have been human beings before that time. So Abraham came, the question of family unit that he brought about. And then, with Moses later, unity of tribe. You know the details, what Moses did. Brought them to Israel to establish a nation of themselves, rather than be slaves. With Jesus, through just a few words he uttered, civilization, which means living in cities, came about. And to cite this example, he was asked about government. He said, no, if he had any guidance on it. He said, no, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, and unto God that which is God. Caesar, Julius Caesar, had what? The model of existence was city-state mansion, wasn't it? City of Rome, as opposed to city of Fars, Persians. Nationhood hadn't come about. It was so everything that civilization developed because of those words of Jesus, he rubber stamped it by saying so. He didn't say it shouldn't, he just said he did not want to give guidance on it. That was for later, for Muhammad. And then Muhammad brought about nationhood, the nation of Islam. Now, even people who don't recognize Muhammad, they recognize a country which is fruit of the teachings of Muhammad's revelation. And there are even people who are so nationalistically, which was never intended by Muhammad. Muhammad just wanted to bring 40 warring tribes and make them one into one nation. And he succeeded. That's a detailed, it requires a detailed explanation how he did it, but he managed that. But when we take that to the excess that we have gotten to, then it's very damaging. So, Baha'u'llah says, let a man glory not in this that he loves his country, but let him rather glory in this that he loves his kind. He's not saying don't love your country, but that is a greater loyalty that we should have to the world. Otherwise there would be wars. Because of my country I shed blood. And that sort of war has been very much reduced by Baha'u'llah. Permissible in defenses, in defensive modes, not in offensive. If we have to protect the country, yes, we can do that. By the way, it just occurred to me that people may not be so familiar with this one, that Muhammad was the same. He didn't allow Muslims to fight. For the first 13 years of his mission, he did not allow them, and they were butchered by people, literally. It's in history, how they would be hacked to pieces, and he would not allow that. And then, until his faithful uncle, he had faithful uncles and unfaithful uncles. His faithful uncle Hamza went to him, who gave his life for Muhammad. He went to him and said, Prophet, surely a nation has emerged. Any nation should be allowed to defend its people. Otherwise, where would be laws? Where would be order? Law and order. And you know that Muhammad's habit was he would go into Mount Hira. He would ascend Mount Hira where he received the original revelation. He would go and pray, and then he came back and said, God, then there are verses in the Quran, which is a compilation of his statements. It's not one book, it's been put together by his followers. That he said that God has permitted defensive wars, and these are the conditions. Now, where some Muslims took it later in the name of Muhammad, that's It's got nothing to do with Muhammad. He only fought defensive wars except on 2 occasions. And they're in history. And that was in the face of when it was reported to him that a treaty, a peace treaty that has been signed, is about to be violated. There's a discussion going on about attacking us. On those 2 occasions, and it's written down very clearly, he said, so you are authorized to lead a preemptive attack to protect the people. And those were the only 2 occasions he allowed that way. Otherwise, it was only defensive. Now, I feel obliged also to mention this. He had quite a few wives. About 36, the names are there. People say 40, that was a good figure to throw. He may have had. There's something in defense of why he did this. Where's equality in this? We should know that there were 40 warring tribes, as I mentioned earlier, around that he unified. 2 of these had a habit of threatening their wives if they were pregnant, but if they gave birth to a girl, they would bury the girl and the mother. And that they would do. Muhammad, with his force, stopped those 2. That practice. Now, in 21st century, we say wonderful, don't we? Who would like to be buried alive? And that practice was changed. And then he said, he only married Khadija, that you remember, his wife, who was the greatest support for him, plus Ali, his son-in-law and cousin, that married his daughter Fatima. So they lived happily for a long time. Khadija was much older than Muhammad. How they married was that she was an entrepreneur, a rich lady, and chose Muhammad as the manager, his manager, to manage her manager to manage her businesses. And he was very successful in managing those businesses. Eventually, they married. Quite a few years older than Muhammad. So she died eventually after several years of happy marriage. And Muhammad was very mournful and did not want to marry, and didn't marry for a long time. You can look at the details. So what happened that he married? The idea came about uniting these warring tribes. He first said every man should take a brother from another tribe so that tribes would become united rather than fighting. And you will not draw your sword on your brother. And then he said more. He said marry from another tribe. How abhorrent that was to them. I marry a girl from another tribe? This is awful. As a matter of faith, they accepted that, and they did. Now you're going to laugh, and I don't mind. Muhammad made an example, and he took one wife from each of those tribes. And that's how it happened, to demonstrate that this was okay to marry others. And this reinforced the process of unifying this. Hence, think of the motive rather than anything else. And if you want to know the motive, one of these wives, and we have their names as I mentioned, was a very old, stooped lady, extremely old. And she went to him. She was very faithful. Prophet, you are young, handsome, and you deserve better than me. And this is not right. Why marry me? Muhammad said, this is as valid a marriage as every other marriage I have entered into. did it for her protection because people were quite rude to people who were disabled and old. Human rights protects people who are old or disabled now. But so it's unimaginable for them that people behaved in this way. Muhammad had to draw that line and protect by being an example of these things. So for each one of them he married, he had a good reason like that. So these things came to my mind to also mention. Now you tell me about what developments did take place after the appearance of each one of these manifestations of God. You can do it randomly. Jesus, Moses, Zoroaster, Buddha, Krishna. Did I put you to sleep?
No. Do you want to say? My hand is frozen. Gabrielle's losing her voice, but after Muhammad came the development of math and geometry.
Come here, because nobody else can hear you.
She's losing her voice.
This is my granddaughter. You're obedient, come on.
She's also filming you, Dad.
No, we don't do that sort of thing. I said it to
Math and geometry?
She is my inspirer.
Okay. What she's saying is that after Muhammad came to the planet, the advancements in math and geometry.
In math and geometry.
And what? And maps and geography grew rapidly.
And astronomy also.
Astronomy. Mm-hmm.
So, the numbers we use, what do we call them? Arabic numbers. They invented. What did we have before? One, the Roman.
Roman numerals.
1, 2, 3, and then V was 4, V was 5, X was 10, and then how did they get to 100? It was C. How did they get to 1,000? They had to create that one. And there were lots of people 200 years ago who couldn't count beyond 20. Too late. But now we have, what do we call it? Arabic algebra came about through their work. Quite right.
Mm-hmm.
And digital mathematics, digits from 0 to 9.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, the one who was instrumental was Muhammad's first successor, Ali. It's a lot he left behind.
Okay.
Yeah, so what
You want
else?
other advancements? Anybody else?
Just show how, through the influence of their words, they did that. You could do it.
Well, I'll just say, in terms of principles, like when Baha'u'llah came 170 odd years ago, at that time, the principles that he revealed of the equality of men and women and the harmony of religion and science and no prejudice, etc., were just unconceivable. But now, those ideas have permeated society and our cultures and are a lot more part of our belief system today. They're not fully there yet, but they've come a long way.
Excellent. Did you all
Abolishment.
hear these principles that we now take as matter of fact? Yes, madam.
Two of my favorite things about the. Should I come front or?
Yeah, you can come here.
Don't forget.
I can hear you then.
Ala.
So nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Ala ako. Two of my favorite. Oh,
Sorry for those who don't know. That's the way we greet. It
okay.
means God. It means God is the all glorious.
Okay.
Two of my favorite things that happened after the manifestations came. First one is for Muhammad. I mean, except for Baha'u'llah, that a lot of physics, in the field of physics, a lot of things advanced. My favorite thing is after Muhammad, Avicenna came. Like Avicenna laid the foundation of medicine, and a lot of math and a lot of other kind of sciences, but medicine was the base of it, that the medicine of the West is built upon it. And one of my favorite ones is the advancement in philosophy that happened after Moses. That a lot of are they Roman? Like, I know them in Farsi, like Socrates.
Greek and Roman.
Socrates.
Socrates.
Yes, a lot of the things that they knew about philosophy came from the learning that they had from the believers of Moses.
Mm-hmm.
So those are my two favorite ones that happened after manifestation. And I think it's beautiful after each manifestation, a beautiful wave of understanding in different areas happen.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Excellent.
I have a question.
Please.
I'm sorry, I don't know any of this.
You don't know
Any of what,
we're all the same. We know where you live.
no, but if you go to study at UBC or anywhere, I've never heard this before. No manifestation, no religious leader has been credited with advances like that. I've never, ever heard it before. Why is that? I mean, I've been schooled in the West, because I've been schooled in Canada, so I've gone to universities, I've gone to Canadian high schools. I have never heard that. What I've heard is after Jesus, it was the fall of the Roman Empire. His will collapsed it. And that's only through the philosophies of all the philosophers that came from the ancient Greeks up to Nietzsche. But I have never heard this that you're talking about. And I just want to know why. I'm sorry. I don't understand. And I'm sure I'm not alone. I mean, how come
No, you're not at all.
you all know, but I don't know?
But
And I've
one
gone to
thing-
university and I've taken
A
history.
couple of things. One is that I wasn't making them up.
I know you're not making them up. I mean, I can understand because there were snippets that I go, yeah, that's right, but I'm going, I couldn't find the timeline.
I think
Thank you. Thank you for saying it. You had to.
Could you just repeat the question so everybody can hear the question that was just asked?
Indeed. She's very surprised that she hadn't heard these things before. About manifestation, about some of these teachings that we're talking about. So how is it that what we're saying is so unknown? Is that a fair way of putting it?
Well, no,
It's not taught in
It's
formal
never-
education in the
It's
West.
not part of the formal education.
it's never, I don't think, like when you go to any history courses or anything like that, you're never gonna see them as central figures in advancing society. Like, you see philosophers as advancing society, but you don't see,
People don't hear.
Okay, can you hear my voice?
Yeah.
And use
Okay.
this.
She's basically saying how's that? Good. Okay, she's basically, Dina is basically saying, she's been educated in the West in formal education, but has never heard these ideas, these links between manifestations of God being on earth and the advancements in science and technology and other gifts that have been brought to the planet, right?
well, no, I mean, there's been, like, at this time, this happened, and, but it's never really directly linked.
Yeah, they've never showed a tie with
Yeah,
it.
Jesus was such a huge figure because
Yeah,
the West is,
Right.
mostly.
and part of that, I think, is that in our education, there's a division between secular and religion.
That's right.
It's a no-no to link them at all, but I'm gonna leave that with that.
Quite honestly, part of it is our fault. We have a duty to make this faith known to others and to move faster than this. And what we just said, forgive me, what's your name?
Dina.
Wonderful. What we just said is a clear indication that we should be moving faster and we should be transmitting what we know in a different way so that it eventually gets such a recognition that is incorporated in all the schools and so on. Now, in some parts of the world it has been incorporated, but it's very rare still. So it's partly our fault, partly because things wait until they become timely for humanity, and to see whether the human society has developed to the stage that it can swallow this, all the changes, accept all these changes. As you said, they see Jesus as a big figure, massive, and they're so embraced and enveloped by Christianity that they cannot think of anything else, which then becomes a disservice. In the past, that has been the same, whether in a Christian country, in a Muslim country, or in a Zoroastrian country, but with different ways and tactics, that position has been maintained. But unbeknown to us all, the pervasive influence of the power of God is permeating the entire human society so that humanity becomes more receptive. Just the same as the analogy of the sun. Not only those who stand in the sun benefit from it directly, but also those who are in the shade, they benefit. And the truth is that even at night, that we think there is no sun, there is a sun that's warming up, keeping the planet warm, so that we may exist until the next morning when it dawns. Human society is like that. Eventually, we come to recognize these things. Yes, please.
I just wanted to add on to what you had said. I found it very poignant when you provided an explanation that really we, as humans, have to be ready to digest this form of thinking. And by way of one comparison that came to my mind, is now as humans, we're just beginning to digest in a qualitative way that we are all from one planet. Because we can see that planet from space and it's before us. We can see that what is happening in one part of the hemisphere affects the other part of the hemisphere. But if we look back, humanity, although we've been sharing this planet for such a long time period, thousands, and probably well beyond that, it's only as of recent that we're able to not just understand it, but accept it. And so I just wanted to bring that to point because I see it as not just our acceptance of spirituality, and many of it have consistent threads and they continue.
Yeah.
It's about our ability as humanity now, the awareness of it all, but also our ability to accept it. And it seems to go hand in hand.
Thank you. There is something I just recalled from what you were saying earlier. Thank you for this contribution. I remember I mentioned here, but I didn't conclude on it, when I mentioned that on meaning Nightingale, the poet, that met with his son, Baha'u'llah, and they sought martyrdom in the path of Baha'u'llah, and they were granted it. They gave their lives to Abdullah, his son, who had done so much. So he was asking Baha'u'llah, this great poet, in the last year of Baha'u'llah's earthly life, said, this beautiful cause, when will it become universal? How can the rest of humanity hear about this? Baha'u'llah said, humanity is busy with the other things, but eventually, the way humanity is moving only leads to lack of religion and lack of faith and lack of trust, and would head for faithlessness. And eventually they will banish the subject of religion from schools. I think we've experienced that in our lives.
Yeah.
Because religion was not able to bring any good except fanaticism and strife and fights between people of different religions, which religion is not meant to do, Baha'u'llah said. When they fire, he said, used a very strong word, when they banish religion from schools, eventually they realize that morals go down and immorality sets in. Wise amongst people will get together to see how they can imbue their schools with a moral code that immorality would not become so rampant in a society. In their consultation, they become aware that morality, behavior, ethics, they are implications of religious training. Well, is there any religion that gives you that without strife, fanaticism, discord, wrangling, disunity, conflict? Baha'u'llah says they will eventually come to recognize the faith of God for this day. They will then incorporate it in their school curriculum. So we are going along the path. Isn't that interesting, you're saying what he said? We're going along the path to ready our society for incorporation of his teachings that give the moral teachings, does away with fights between people of different religions, recognizes that the source from which each and every one of them came is the same, and recognizes the contributions made by all of them. Like what we call, Baha'u'llah called, revelation of God being progressive and ever advancing. We need a progressive revelation rather than cessation of it.
Do you have any more questions?
Comments, disagreements?
Questions?
Yes, ma'am.
I was just thinking about Dina's question, and it makes me wonder about your analogy about going to school and the readiness of each child. And I think that with each manifestation, there was a certain revelation that was given, but on the readiness of humanity. And at that time, I feel like it was a lot of building of our moral education. And what religion has become now, I think in the perception of everybody, is a series of do's and don'ts. And because of that, it's kind of pushing away people and not wanting to be part of what they call an organized religion, which I always wonder, would you prefer a disorganized religion? But it makes me wonder if that's what's deterring people. And like you also said, is that the Baha'i Faith is the first religion that has a blueprint, that has a common vision for everyone to follow, but it also gives you steps. It has an administrative body, and it has something that is actually bringing unity within the diversity of humanity. And it is addressing issues that were not addressed before, such as the harmony between science and religion and the equality between men and women. So partly, yes, the Baha'is that are currently accepted the Baha'i Faith haven't fulfilled this responsibility as quickly as we should have by now. But also, I don't think a lot of people have heard of it because they've stuck to the religion that they're at because it's become more of a tradition that's been passed on from generation, and it's a sense of comfort for them. And to be outside of that comfort, you're asked to take on responsibilities that sometimes we don't want to burden ourselves. It's just easier to do what we've known to do. And so it is really asking us to take a risk and to be in this area that's uncomfortable for us and to try it and to see what's working, but then to look for that also sense of belonging with a group of people that have the same common vision as what we want. And I think this is why it's still not really visible, but it is becoming more and more visible because of the state that our world is moving towards, and now people are thirsty for it. But at the same time, they don't want to see it as a religion because the experiences that they've had with past religions is caused more harm than unity. So when people ask me about the Baha'i Faith, I don't oftentimes introduce it as a religion, but I oftentimes introduce it as a tool that could be used to help you move forward in society. And then I always try to say, it comes from self-transformation first. And if you see yourself transforming, then how could you share this beautiful gift with those around you? So I think this is how we need to look at it, rather than I have this religion and I want to convert you. Because we're not really converting anyone, because I think when I hear conversion, it means I'm denying my previous manifestations, whereas a Baha'i, we're not, because it's like a building block. It's like going through school. You're not denying what your grade 1 teacher or your grade 2 teacher taught you. You're building on those skills that you were taught so that you're ready for the future or the way ahead. I think maybe, I don't know, Dina, if that's
No, that's
helpful.
beautiful. Thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was just thinking about what you said through like human creation, through manifestations of God. It made me think of the printing press, which was created specifically to
Do
spread.
you want to come here?
Oh no, it's all right.
I
I'll
really want to hear you.
Oh, okay.
I really
He needs to,
All right.
needs to hear you.
Okay. This is very good.
Tell everyone your name.
Excellent.
I'm Nick. Nice to meet you.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So when you were talking about
Closer, Nicholas.
So when you were talking about creation, human creation through manifestations of God, it made me think of the printing press, which was specifically created in Germany, I believe, to spread Jesus' teachings, and it created so much more than that. So it just made me think of that. Yeah.
Good one. Thank you.
Well, there are refreshments also.
Should we just ask, does anyone else have any more questions of any type about previous manifestations, Baha'u'llah, about how we can all work together to enhance the growth of humanity. Ask him anything, really. He'll give you an answer. Melanie.
1, 2, 3.
Okay. Basim, do you want to come up?
Yes.
I think that one of the main things that we might need to do is to maybe learn to inspire others to focus on technological advancements for the benefit of humanity, and in doing so we could kind of have other countries come together. And right now, if you were to look at what's going on in the world, at least from the scientific perspective, everything is just exploding, right? So I'd like to say the best is yet to come, right? So like even shortly after Bob Mahalla came later in the 19th century, right, we had Maxwell's equations for electromagnetism, which largely powered today's world, right? It powers your devices, and then later on we had different physical theories which led to the creation of medical devices like the MRI, which saved people's lives, and more is currently happening. And perhaps if we kind of maybe promote STEM education among other people, and to inspire others to kind of, go towards that in that direction, I think our world will become a much better place than it already currently is, and also to bring in a tint of religion to it, to kind of make it, have it make more sense. Because I think one of the conversations that we were having before is just the fact that, there's a lot of people that are against religion. And actually, I think one of the main reasons to this is because sometimes within a religious text and scriptures, there are certain, things that are written that some people may think are absurd, but in reality, they might actually be symbolic, right? Like Muhammad, flying on a winged horse and splitting the moon in two. The moon is a quarter the size of the earth. It could not have possibly happened, but it means something, right? Maybe it means the dawning of a new age. Maybe a winged horse, because they don't exist, maybe it represents a miracle. And maybe we could interpret, you could see God as a miracle, or our, state of civilization as a miracle. And I don't know, it all kind of comes together in this case.
Thank you. Melanie, do you have your hand up?
I don't really have an answer to this, and I actually have more of a question because of what is happening in the world right now. And I feel like there's a lot of division, and but I also see what's happening with AI. We've got Chat GPT come through. I don't know if you've heard of that yet, but what I've been thinking about is how we can bring back some of what Baha'u'llah and Jesus and Muhammad and what they have given us with the morals and ethics, and how we can bring that into technology. So that's been on my mind quite a bit. I don't have an answer to it, but I feel like more than ever, as a human species, we really need to look at what is important as a human race, and how do we go forward knowing that we have AI, and what does it mean to be human? And technology can do so much, but then all of our messengers of God have given us this information, and how do we apply it now to what we're now facing in the world? So I don't have an answer to it. It's just something that I've been thinking about more so, and I think more than ever we need to come together, and we need the unity. So I see that Baha'u'llah's message is even that much more important now. So I wanted to thank you for being here, and thank you for your talk today.
Baha'u'llah, like the analogy of the sun, like the rain that showers on all, obedient and rebellious, like wind is so unrestrained that we can all breathe. Guidance of the manifestation is like that. Each and every one of us has the ability to use our capacities, our God-given endowments to spread this. But as you said, central to all of this is unity. Unless we are united, we cannot work collectively, effectively. So that's always at the heart of it. Why are we here? Because God loved us. He wanted to see us created. He brought us about. It's in all the books. That because He loved us. Now, how did He love us before He created us? Because He could envision. He has a vision that is more overarching than anyone else's vision. He loved us. We get an inkling of that when we see the wife is pregnant and there's this joyful anticipation of the birth of a new addition to the family. And we have hopes and aspirations. But with God it's different. He knows what He's doing. And isn't it wonderful to know that He loved each one of us to be loved? I need the microphone. It's a habit, it's clinical, not speaking up. It's a disease. When we were little children, if my brother and I particularly, if we would speak up too loud, or if we spoke harshly to one another, we were two unimportant little ones after 5 great sisters. But anyway, my mother would say, calm down, tone down. Don't speak so loudly. My brother didn't listen to that. My younger brother, he speaks. He's very vibrant when he speaks. But I was very obedient. And nobody could ever hear me. Unless I hear the bad vocal cords. But really, I wish he was here. Yes, please.
You mentioned as a child you had the opportunity to interact with a scholarly gentleman, I forget the name. What sticks with you from that interaction? What do you remember? What's one thing that stuck with you? You mentioned that you were quite touched.
Mr. Samandari?
Yeah.
Yeah. Who was in the presence of Baha'u'llah.
You're bringing him right back into this room by affecting me.
Dad, maybe you can explain, like I know I asked him this question before, because this man had been in the presence of Baha'u'llah, like who do you know who's been in the presence of a manifestation of God? So I asked you what he said it was like to be in the presence of Baha'u'llah. Do you remember what you said?
Well, he was there for quite a while, when he was 16, and he never forgot, and he said his kindness, and in some ways so ordinary you wouldn't believe, his affection, and also his meekness. Is the meek one of the world. No one suffered from the hands of others as much as Baha'u'llah did, in prison and exile, in chains and fetters, thrown into a dungeon, filthy dungeon in Tehran. Yet he was so kind to everyone else. I'll just cite some examples. Once, I'll get back to that.
Okay.
Someone knocked on the door. This is later on in Baha'u'llah's life. And was desperate for help. And Baha'u'llah went there and assisted him. And he left very happily. One of those people who were always keeping close to Baha'u'llah asked, "My beloved, you're always kind to everyone, but you were so much more than extra kind to this one. Why?" Baha'u'llah said, "I recognized him. He was the prison ward during one of my imprisonments. And because of the bad way that he dealt with me, I felt so sad that he had fallen into this sort of condition. So I felt I should compensate him for that." Could anyone understand that? That is the degree of kindness. So Baha'u'llah was like that all the time. And his son Abdullah, I'll get to that. Abdullah was in Paris speaking. Well, he was all over Europe after he was released from imprisonment. This is the son of Baha'u'llah. He gave many talks everywhere. He came to Canada too. He was in Canada for 11 days, chiefly in Montreal, passed through Toronto. We were already in Western Canada. But, and he spoke in various European countries. And when he was in Paris, a brutal member of Qajar dynasty, who had caused the death of so many Baha'is, heard about him. Zilba Sultan was his name. And he asked to see Abdullah. He was very amazed that Abdullah was so popular. He wanted to see him. Some of the friends around Abdullah said, "Surely you're not going to accept to talk to such a brutal individual." Abdullah said, "Why not?" And he went to see him. Gave him time, they met, they had good time together, and they left. When he went back, some of those same friends had been hoping that Abdullah would give him a lesson or two about his behavior, or tell him off at least. He came back and he said a few nice things, and these friends were very concerned that Abdullah had not done what they had hoped to do. One of them said, "Didn't you remind him of his brutality?" "Why not, beloved master?" Abdullah said, "Every time during our conversation, the thought crossed my mind. I saw the beauty of the face of my beloved father in his face, and I felt abashed, and I refrained from such references." Does that make sense to anyone in this day and age? The degree of kindness. This is what it is. So, with Mr. Samandari that met Baha'u'llah, about his meeting, he said, "I was in there at the ordinariness and immense love of Baha'u'llah." He said, "I was in the room, and a few people came, and this is a very ordinary story that touched him so much. And they always served tea to those people, the guests that came in, and then said to Mr. Samandari, who was a young boy, his first name is Tarazullah. He said, "Taraz, share some of these roses." Baha'u'llah loved roses. with people who are present in here. And so we took a bunch of these roses and gave one to each, in obedience to what Baha'u'llah had said. And keep one for yourself too. He kept one for himself, and he was about to sit down. Baha'u'llah said, "What happened to my share?" Mrs. Amanda was very moved by this, so he went and apologized. Because why wouldn't he give one to Baha'u'llah? To give him, it really needed courage. To give him, who is a manifestation of the all-possessing God, who has no needs. That's what he was thinking. But Baha'u'llah said, "No, give me my share too." And he always remembered this. There are lots that he told us honestly. What do you remember?
He's looking at me.
All I know is through my children. I
Well-
have to tell them stories before they went to bed.
Yeah. Well, I remember you saying that. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah.
They would hear you better if you stayed.
I'm standing up there. Okay, you can hear me, right? Yeah, okay. I remember you saying that on the one hand, in his presence, he was this humble, compassionate human being, but at the same time, you could sense the divinity in him,
The authority.
the authority placed in him by God.
All at
So
the
this
same time.
all powerful and humble together in one being at the same time.
See,
I thought that was amazing.
what you hear and what you learn when you're a child, you remember forever. So, yes, absolutely. And Mrs. Amanda was saying, when I arrived, he started chanting really melodiously, the tablet to the King of Iran, which is the longest of all the letters Baha'u'llah had written to any sovereign. It was to Nasser-Din Shah, who was really brutal. Himself and his prime minister called the death of about 20,000 people or more from this faith. And Baha'u'llah was reading this tablet, chanting it melodiously. And Mrs. Amanda said, I saw witnessed two things. That humility and meekness of Baha'u'llah at the same time as authority through his voice. Both authority and meekness you could hear, you could visualize. O King, I was but a man asleep upon my couch, when lo, the breezes of the All-Merciful wafted over me and taught me the knowledge of all things. This thing is not from me, but from him who is the all-knowing, the all-wise. And he bade me to lift up my voice between earth and heaven, and there befell me that which hath caused the eyes of every man of understanding to shed tears. It begins like that. But then goes on to explain what had happened. So it's 30 pieces of beauty and sharing of excerpts from his, what he had revealed, such as hidden words and other things, to bring some sort of refreshment to the heart of this brutal individual. And also this fact that Baha'u'llah challenged in that letter to the king to gather together the clergy that he was so committed to and call me too. And I will answer any questions regarding the validity of this present dispensation of providence. Now, the king, of course, called the clergy and said, what do you have to say to this? Look at his letter. This man did not even go to school, and he's saying it outright, and he's known, and he has this knowledge to write such beautiful words. What is your answer? They consulted and they said, well, he's a magician, he would confuse you, and we don't suggest your majesty to listen to him. called such a meeting. And the king, although he was brutal, he was not an idiot. He was actually a poet too, you know, so he was also a poet. Mediocre sort of poetry, not like Hafiz and Sally. But so he was very literate. So he said, I have fed the clergy all my life with all the gifts that I have given them, and they don't dare to see the challenging expressions of this unlettered individual, Baha'u'llah. This is amazing. He wasn't happy with the clergy. Incredible. And one other thing, just to branch out a little bit further from there, he said another thing, you know, even terrible people have some good points, you know. They do. He lived a long time until he was assassinated on the 50th anniversary of his reign. Anyway, when Abdul-Baha, the son of Baha'u'llah, passed away, this is years later, Abdul-Baha's ministry was for 29 years after Baha'u'llah. Some of the clergy were doing the drums and so on and celebrating the death of Abdul-Baha. And the king said, how stupid can these people be? They are celebrating the death of Baha'u'llah, oblivious of the fact that if he has died, he has left behind a son, Abdul-Baha, that will make his cause universal. Can you imagine the insight? And it is becoming, it is universal in that it's reached so many countries. Its literature have been translated into over 181 languages. So, but you know, Baha'u'llah touched people in amazing ways, not just with the authority that he had, but kindness that people could never forget. There was one sincere one, you know, the Angel of Comment. He got that title from Western Baha'is that met him, Hyder Ali. And he said, I attained the presence of Baha'u'llah a few times. So they would get permission to go there and they would be guests for a long time. He went there once and then he didn't want to leave. He went to Baha'u'llah on the last day when they were dismissed. He begged Baha'u'llah to give him 2 more weeks. Baha'u'llah said, okay, don't be so miserable, stay. He stayed and he was in heaven, he says, in his memoirs. And then 2 weeks later, again, and Baha'u'llah said, what's happening? He said, I thought you'd be here, you would be happy. But you're looking miserable, you have a long face. He said, but, you know, we are to leave tomorrow. Can I beg for 2 more weeks? He said, yes. Baha'u'llah said, yes, you can stay 2 more weeks. As long as in 2 weeks' time you would leave here happily. I don't want people to leave here and go back to their countries with a long face. So I think he knew. And so he stayed. And then next time, he thought of another noble idea. He went to Baha'u'llah and said, I'm sorry I'm leaving, but I know you said I can stay this last 2 weeks, but I have a guarantor that if you grant me 2 weeks permission to stay here, he would see that I leave. Imagine, what the cheek. Baha'u'llah said, who is your guarantor? you cannot be trusted. Not with this sort of long face. He said, I have a good guarantee, quite acceptable to you. And who is he? He said, Abdul Baha. So he pressed the right button. And Baha'u'llah's heart, every time you would mention Abdul Baha's name, because of who he was and who he would be, he said, you found the best guarantor. You stay here 2 more weeks and then you leave. Don't come back with other guarantors. So you deserve these 2 weeks. He stayed, and then Baha'u'llah said to him, listen, go happily. But he left, he was going, descending the mountain, going, and he was sad, but only remembered that Baha'u'llah said, when you go back, show the happiness you experienced here. Don't be a bad ambassador. Be a good one. You know how he would talk to them in such an ordinary way. And they knew who he was. They definitely knew. Anyway, have some fruit, have something. No more questions.
Do you have a question? No, your turn.